Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And tonight we're going to start out with one of the members of one of the first families of the Big Ten, Bump Elliott, who died recently at the age of 94. And he's a legitimate Big Ten legend along with his brother Pete. He's an especial legend at two schools, Michigan and Iowa. He was born in Detroit, but he grew up in Bloomington, Illinois, where his brother Pete was born. He was a three-sport athlete at Purdue before World War II, baseball, basketball, and football. In football, he was a running back. During World War II, he served in the Marine Corps, and he came back to the Big Ten after the war to Michigan, where he became the MVP of the league in the 1946 season. He was a running back, and his brother Pete was the quarterback on a team known as the Mad Magicians because you could never tell where the ball was going once it got to the backfield. There were 3 or 4 players in motion who might have had the ball. That Michigan team was 9-0, undefeated, untied. He led the league in scoring and also won the Chicago Tribune Silver Football as the most valuable player in the Big Ten, and he was then named an All-American. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame as a player. He was an assistant coach at a couple of schools, including Iowa, and in 1959 he became the coach at Michigan for 10 years, and in 1964 he won the Big Ten and won the 1964 Rose Bowl. During that same period, brother Pete was the coach at the University of Illinois, and he won the Big Ten and won the 1963 Rose Bowl the year before, with the famous team that had Dick Butkus and Jim Grabowski on it. That's the last Rose Bowl that the University of Illinois has won, by the way. Bump coached at Michigan until 1969. He was replaced after the last game of the 1968 season, a 50-14 drubbing by Woody Hayes' national champions. That was the game where Woody was asked why he went for 2 points with the score 48-14, and he said, because the rules won't let me go for 3 points. Bump was replaced by none other than Bo Schembechler, who actually beat Woody the next year and went to the Rose Bowl. Bump landed on his feet, though, and became even more of a legend at Iowa. A year later, he was made the athletic director at Iowa, and he did an absolutely incomparable job. During his time at Iowa, he hired 4 of the most prominent coaches in Hawkeye history: the legendary Dan Gable in wrestling, Hayden Fry in football, Lute Olson and Tom Davis in men's basketball. During his tenure, the Hawkeyes won 34 Big Ten Conference championships and 11 national titles in wrestling. He ushered in an era of stability unheard of in modern college athletics. Since he retired, Iowa's had only 2 other athletic directors, and the athletic director he hired for women's sports in 1973, Christine Grant, stayed for 27 years. For his work at Iowa, he's also in the College Football Hall of Fame as an athletic director. And Dan Gable, his wrestling coach, one of the greatest, if not the greatest wrestling coaches of all time, said, "Bump was a difference maker in my life and the lives of many others. I felt lucky to be under a guy who knew very well what he was doing in terms of his business. At first he didn't make any promises, but he said, 'You do well, and I will do well for you,' and he honored that." He's in the Hall of Fame at both the University of Michigan and the University of Iowa, and he always rooted for the University of Michigan, except when they played Iowa. The sports information director at Iowa said he was truly the leader during the golden era of Iowa athletics. The Elliott family was to Iowa what the Kennedys were to Massachusetts. They're royalty. We're going to move on now to Rene Auberjunois, who died recently at the age of 79. Really a good actor. And he also had a pretty amazing family background. His family was Swiss. His father was a famous writer, and his uncle was a famous post-impressionist painter. And on top of all that, he was a descendant from the House of Bonaparte, so he's related in some way to Napoleon. He was born in New York City, and he was surrounded by a bunch of actor types like Burgess Meredith, Helen Hayes, and John Houseman, who became one of his mentors. He was also a babysitter for Bill Malden's kids for a while. He started out on Broadway. In fact, he won a Tony for Best Supporting Actor in 1970 for Coco, playing opposite Katharine Hepburn. And then he moved on to television and movies, and he's the kind of actor that you know about him depending on how old you are and what series or what movie you're familiar with. So he had long-running stints in Benson, which we've talked about before, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He was in The Little Mermaid. Everybody's going to know him for something different. It's my show, so I'll talk about how I knew him. His first credited role in the movies was in a Robert Altman movie. Robert Altman loved him. He used him in a couple of movies, and he was the original Father Mulcahy in MASH, the movie version, and he had a couple of really good lines. This is when Sally Kellerman as Hot Lips Houlihan can't believe she's stuck with Elliott Gould, who is Trapper John.
I wonder how a degenerated person like that could have reached a position of responsibility in the Army Medical Corps.
He was drafted.
And this is the dilemma he faces when he's called upon to minister to the dentist painless.
I checked with the military vicar's office. You see, I cannot give absolution to a man who is about to commit suicide.
Of course, that scene is where the famous song Suicide is Painless, the theme song of MASH, comes from. As I said, everybody has their favorite Rene Auberjunois role, and my favorite was when he played Dr. William Tewksbury, Fraser Crane's teacher at Harvard, who comes to see him in Seattle, and they have an impromptu therapy session. One of the best scenes in the show, I might add.
All right, Professor, you know, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but I'm afraid you've lost your touch. Where's your DSM?
There.
Emotionally stunted 8-year-old my eye. Here's what I'm going through. Phase of life issue. A problem associated with a particular developmental phase or other life circumstance.
Please, a midlife crisis.
It's obvious, really. You know, I'm surprised it didn't occur to me sooner. If someone had called my show with this problem, I'd have diagnosed it inside a minute.
And then what would you have done?
That depends on the caller.
All right. The caller is you.
Fine.
On line 1, we have Fraser Crane from Seattle.
Hello, Dr. Crane. I love your show. I'm a big fan. I won't bore you with all the details of my life because you know them. Suffice to say, I'm a successful psychiatrist. My problem is that, in spite of the life I've built, I feel empty. Emptiness. The eternal void. If I'm not mistaken, it was John Keats who once wrote...
Stalling. Deal with the feelings.
All right, fair enough. Perhaps, caller, if we reframe the issue, we can...
Redefining the problem. Deal with the feelings.
Let's run down the Beck Depression inventory.
Re-diagnosing. You know what the problem is. The caller feels empty. Go on.
Okay. Last month in the New England Journal...
He's already read it.
How do you know?
The caller is Fraser Crane. If you did, he did.
I can suggest certain visualization techniques.
He knows them already.
Look, if he knows all this, then why is he calling?
He told you. Because he's empty. Keep going.
Well, sometimes it helps to write yourself a letter.
He's already got himself on the phone.
But I don't know what he wants.
Then why do you keep trying to bury him in psychiatric exercises?
Because that's all I have. I'm sorry, caller. I can't help you.
And here he is waxing philosophic on his last day on Star Trek.
You know, I mean, it happens, of course, and we're very lucky that we knew, and so there's a sense of closure and of completion. I don't know. 7 years. I did another show. Benson ran that for a long time, too, and even when you do a long run of a Broadway show, a musical or something, it's like, there's that, what time is it? It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I should be in makeup. That'll hang on for a while. And then other things will come along and the river of life will flow.
Rene Auberjunois, excellent actor. Well, I'm going to close with our feature tonight. And by way of introduction of our feature, there's this.
Well, hi, and welcome to Sesame Street. You're just in time. Crummy! Oh, come on now, Oscar. I like being miserable. That makes me happy.
It does,
but I don't like being happy, so that makes me miserable.
My name is Caroll Spinney.
Well, Caroll Spinney died recently at the age of 85, and he was one of the most recognizable characters in the world, although you wouldn't know it if you met him on the street. He was the last of the original puppeteers from Sesame Street, and he played Big Bird as well as Oscar the Grouch. We can't even begin to count how many children grew up with Caroll Spinney, who played Big Bird for nearly 50 years. Here's CBS News reporting on his death.
For generations of Sesame Street lovers, it might be hard to believe that Oscar the Grouch and Big Bird were actually the same person. Yes, it's true.
Oh, an invitation to what?
Caroll Spinney gave life and voice to both big personalities. He was there from the start and for nearly 50 years. Today we learned the legendary puppeteer died at his Connecticut home after a long illness.
About 3 years ago, a movie came out about Caroll Spinney and Big Bird, and he was interviewed on the Today Show.
8 feet tall, yellow, and friendly. You probably think you know all there is to know about Big Bird, but think again. Today, contributing correspondent Jenna Buchhager caught up with the man behind the feathers. Hi, Jenna.
I sure did. Many of us have never even lived in a world without Big Bird. He's one of the most beloved characters of all time. And it turns out the man inside the yellow suit is pretty extraordinary, too. He's one of the biggest stars on television, but you probably don't know his name or recognize his face. Need a hint?
La la.
He is Caroll Spinney, better known as Big Bird, a role he's been playing since Sesame Street's first days in 1969, when he was handpicked by Muppets creator Jim Henson.
And he said, I'm going to be involved with a new show called Sesame Street, and would you be interested in working with the Muppets? Yeah, it was sort of like saying...
Is your dream coming true?
Yeah, a dream coming true.
46 years later, Spinney is coming out from behind the beak, the subject of a new documentary titled I Am Big Bird. The film details Spinney's life and career. We learn about Big Bird's early years in feathers.
He wasn't a child. Some script came along and I said, I think the way this should be played is that Big Bird's a kid. And he's like the little kids who were reaching in all the way.
How much of Big Bird is you?
I was one of these kind of kids who wanted to do the right thing. So that's what Big Bird is always trying to be, is to be a good kid. He happens to be a kid that's a bird, 8 feet 2.
Big Bird's adventures have taken Spinney around the world.
This is the Great Wall of China.
Made Big Bird a Hollywood star.
Oh, I'm not a chicken, actually. I'm a bird on the run.
Winning him a number of famous admirers.
Big Bird! That's what I'm talking about. Big Bird!
While Spinney has charmed the world as Big Bird, he's also been called on to show his grouchy side, pulling double duty as Oscar the Grouch. Can you choose who you like to play more, Big Bird or Oscar? Or is that like choosing a favorite child?
No, well, Oscar's kind of cool, because it's fun to play somebody very different than oneself. On the other hand, Big Bird is my kid. In some ways, I love him best.
But it hasn't been all sunny days. Spinney says NASA approached him in the 80s with the plan to get kids interested in space by sending Big Bird into orbit, a plan that never came to be. NASA instead sent teacher Krista McCullough on the Challenger shuttle.
And all of a sudden, it goes boom. And I said, oh my God.
So that moment gave you chills.
And it was like we all started crying. We knew it was a disaster. Made my scalp crawl to think I was supposed to be on that.
But no matter where Spinney and Big Bird go, he never forgets his true audience.
It's so fun to play something that that when children see him, they melt in just the right way.
When you think about life without Big Bird,
I think it wouldn't be quite as exciting, because he's another world and lives another life than I do. And yet it's part of my life. I'm lucky.
Lucky for all of us that Caroll Spinney is a big part of our lives, no matter how old we get. And I have to say, I couldn't help but kiss Big Bird.
Is that allowed?
Well, he liked it.
Yeah? He didn't complain?
He is madly in love with his wife, who he worked on the show. He met on the show years ago, and she was there. I think she got her feathers in a little ruffle.
40? Yeah, got that. 46 years. That's extraordinary.
Isn't that amazing? He's a great guy.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. Ironically, on the day that Caroll Spinney died, the creators of Sesame Street and the cast were honored at the Kennedy Center with a Kennedy Center Award, the top award in performing arts in the United States. And Caroll Spinney got a posthumous mention. In honor of Big Bird, I'm going to close tonight with a little bit of Big Bird's song written by that noted composer Elmo. Here he is accompanied by Elmo and Snuffleupagus, and this one is for grandson James.
Big Bird song. La la la, la 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 la, la la la, la la la, la 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 la. I love to sing la 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 la, Big Bird song. La 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 la, la 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 la, Big Bird song.